Human saved an alien outcast _ then she fell in love. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. ****. It was a cold, desolate planet, the wind howling like the cries of 1,000 lost souls. The sky was a permanent shade of gray, as if the planet had been abandoned by hope itself. Among the barren hills, one figure trudged forward, a silhouette against the biting winds. Lyra, an alien outcast, had been cast away by her people, abandoned on this desolate world to suffer in solitude. Her skin, a deep shade of teal, blended with the rocky terrain, making her seem almost like part of the landscape itself. She had once been proud, once held a position of power, but now she was nothing more than a wandering soul with no home to return to. She had lost everything, her family, her place in society, and any semblance of a future. For days, she had wandered the cold plains, hoping to find shelter, but none came. Her body was weak, her strength fading with each passing hour. It wasn't supposed to end like this. She had once been someone important, someone feared. But now, here she was, a discarded piece of her race, left to perish alone. Her only companions were the silent, unforgiving winds and the endless, barren hills that stretched out before her. She had accepted her fate. There was no hope, no future, only the cold and the darkness. As her legs buckled beneath her, and the strength drained from her body, she collapsed onto the frozen ground. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps as she felt the weight of her world, her people's rejection, pressed down on her chest. The alien outcast had finally been abandoned by all. But then, just as she thought it was the end, a sound pierced through the winds, a soft hum, like the approach of something big, something real. Lyra's head jerked up, her fading eyes searching through the snow and dust. There, cutting through the storm, was a figure, a human. He appeared like a shadow at first, but as he got closer, Lyra could make out his features. He was tall, muscular, wearing thick, protective armor that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. His eyes were filled with determination, yet there was something kind about them too. He was a human, someone from the distant planet Earth. His name was Tom. Without a word, Tom kneeled beside her, his large hand gently reaching out. Despite the cold, despite the danger, he took off his coat and wrapped it around her, his warm body shielding her from the icy winds. "You're safe now," Tom said, his voice low but filled with certainty. "I won't let you die here." Lyra stared at him, bewildered. She had never met a human before, let alone one who would risk his life to save an outcast like her. She had always believed that humans were primitive, selfish, and incapable of compassion. But this human, this stranger, was proving her wrong. Tom's gentle touch was a stark contrast to the harsh world she had known. For the first time in days, she felt warmth. Not just from the coat, but from the human's presence. She couldn't explain it, but something deep within her stirred. Tom helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they began to walk together, away from the desolate land she had called home. In the distance, the storm still raged, but she was no longer alone. Tom was there, offering his protection, his strength. And for the first time in a long time, Lyra allowed herself to believe, maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. She had never expected this. She had never expected him. But as they moved forward, step by step, something began to grow between them, a bond, a connection. It was something she had never thought possible. A human, a stranger, had saved her life. And she was beginning to realize that perhaps this was just the beginning of something much greater than she could ever have imagined. Tom had been walking for what felt like hours, with Lyra leaning heavily on him. The winds had died down a bit, but the bitter cold still stung at their faces. The cold planet was unforgiving, but for the first time in days, Lyra felt something other than despair. Tom, despite his heavy suit and hard exterior, was a constant source of warmth. She found herself noticing things she hadn't before, the way he moved, with a fluid grace that betrayed the strength in his frame, or the quiet determination in his eyes that made her feel safe, something she hadn't felt in a long time. As they reached a small cave sheltered from the wind, Tom helped her sit down on a makeshift bed of dry leaves he had gathered along the way. The cold wasn't as biting here, but the exhaustion was setting in, and Lyra had no strength left. "Rest here," Tom said, settling beside her. "You've been through a lot." Lyra looked at him, trying to form words, but nothing came. She had always been proud, even in her lowest moments, but now, she was too tired to hold on to that pride. She just nodded. Tom went to work, rummaging through his pack to pull out some ration bars and a flask of warm water. He offered it to her gently, making sure she took small sips. As she ate, her mind wandered. She had always believed that humans were beneath her kind. She thought them weak, primitive, incapable of understanding the complexities of the universe. But here was Tom, someone who should have left her to die on this desolate planet, yet he stayed. And not only stayed, but offered her kindness, something she hadn't seen in her own people for years. Tom settled beside her, taking a deep breath. "I know you're probably wondering why I'm helping you," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Truth is, I can't stand seeing someone in pain. It doesn't matter where you come from or what you've done." Lyra wanted to speak, to tell him he didn't understand, but for the first time, she didn't know what to say. There was a part of her that wanted to push him away, to remain distant. But another part of her, a part she hadn't recognized before, wanted to reach out and thank him. "You're not like the others," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. Tom looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm just a guy trying to do what's right." Lyra's heart tightened at his words. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been abandoned by my people. I'm nothing." Tom shook his head. "You're not nothing. You're someone who deserves to be saved, just like anyone else." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Lyra couldn't remember the last time anyone had said something like that to her. As the night grew colder, the warmth between them seemed to grow. Despite the vastness of space and the differences between them, in this moment, they were not so different after all. The next morning, the two of them set out again. Lyra's strength was returning slowly, but Tom's presence beside her made the journey bearable. They didn't speak much, but there was an understanding between them, something unspoken but real. As they walked together, Lyra began to realize that she had never truly been alone. Tom had saved her in more ways than one, and in doing so, he had unknowingly begun to heal her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt the spark of something new, something worth living for. The days had passed slowly since Tom and Lyra began their journey across the cold planet, the wind still howling relentlessly, but the warmth between them remained steady. Lyra had been feeling stronger, her body slowly regaining some of its former vitality, though she still had a long way to go. The constant support from Tom was a reminder that she was no longer alone, no longer abandoned by the very people who had cast her aside. Every step they took felt like a small victory against the isolation she had lived with for so long. Tom remained focused, his eyes scanning the desolate terrain while he occasionally checked the readings on his portable device. The alien world they were on was harsh, and their survival depended on careful navigation. Yet, even amidst the unforgiving landscape, there was a growing bond between the two. Lyra couldn't ignore the way she felt when he was around. His presence comforted her in a way she hadn't expected, and the thought of her people, the ones who had cast her out, seemed distant, almost irrelevant now. She had not allowed herself to care for anyone in a long time. Her position in her society had taught her to be strong, to rely only on herself. But Tom was different. He had shown her kindness when she had least expected it, and in return, she felt something stir inside her. It was subtle at first, but it was there. Something soft, something human. As they continued walking, Tom broke the silence. "You're doing better," he said, glancing over at her with a small but genuine smile. Lyra nodded, her lips pressing into a faint, uncertain smile of her own. "Thanks to you," she replied quietly. Tom didn't respond right away, and Lyra could see him grappling with something. His hand, which had been resting on the strap of his pack, clenched briefly before he spoke again. "I'm glad you're still here with me. I wasn't sure what to expect when I found you."
I thought you might, I thought you might push me away.
Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. His words hung in the air between them. She searched his face, trying to find any trace of deceit or ulterior motive, but found none. It was strange how he could be so open with her when she had been so closed off for so long. I didn't think you'd stick around, she admitted.
I didn't think anyone would.
I thought I was already dead when I was left here. But you're still here. Tom met her gaze, his blue eyes steady and unwavering.
I'm not going anywhere.
His words were simple, but they held a truth that resonated deeply within her. Lyra felt her heart skip a beat, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. She couldn't afford to be vulnerable, not with someone like him. Yet, despite herself, she wanted to believe him. As they resumed walking, the silence between them felt more comfortable, more natural. The tension that had once hung thick in the air seemed to have dissipated, replaced by something new, something that neither of them could quite define. They reached the edge of a small cliff, where the wind had carved out an impressive view of the valley below. Tom set his pack down and motioned for Lyra to sit. As they sat together, he pulled out a small food packet and handed it to her. "You've earned a break," he said with a gentle smile.
Lyra accepted the food but didn't eat right away.
She was still trying to process everything, how her life had changed so suddenly, how she had gone from being a powerful member of her species to an outcast, and how, in just a few days, she had begun to trust a human. Tom was quiet for a moment, watching the horizon, before he spoke again. "You know, when I first joined the military, I didn't expect to be sent out to places like this. But now it feels like everything that led me here had a purpose. Meeting you, saving you. I don't know, it just feels like the right thing to do." Lyra felt a knot form in her chest at his words. She had been so closed off for so long that the idea of someone seeing her as more than just an outcast, more than just someone to be pitied, was difficult to process. But Tom wasn't pitying her. He was simply offering his help. And, for the first time in a long time, she found herself accepting it. As they sat together, sharing the small meal in the cold, desolate landscape, Lyra couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't finished yet. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, she was no longer afraid to face it. The journey continued for several days, the harsh terrain showing no mercy, but a strange sense of comfort had settled between Tom and Lyra. As they moved, they began to communicate more easily, their bond growing stronger. They shared stories. Tom told Lyra about Earth, about the sprawling cities and endless blue skies, while Lyra spoke of her world, a planet full of rich history and ancient cultures. Yet, there was always an undercurrent of silence, a lingering unspoken truth between them. They had begun to understand each other, but there was something deeper that neither dared to voice. One evening, as the two of them sat beside a campfire, the heat from the flames warming their skin, Lyra found herself watching Tom. His face was illuminated by the flickering light, his expression calm as he cleaned his gear, but there was a quiet sadness in his eyes that caught her attention. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Tom, why did you save me?" Her voice was soft, her words heavy with curiosity. Tom paused, his movements slowing as he looked over at her. For a long time, he didn't say anything. He simply stared into the flames, his mind clearly elsewhere. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "I guess I don't like seeing anyone suffer. But you," he paused, searching for the right words, "you were different. I didn't want you to die here, alone. Maybe because I've been there, feeling like there's no way out. I couldn't just leave you." Lyra looked down at her hands, tracing the lines of her palms absent-mindedly. She had always been proud, always told herself that she could do everything on her own, but there was something in his words that made her pause. She had never considered that someone might save her for no other reason than compassion. "You don't know what it's like to be rejected," Lyra said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "To be cast out and left to die. It changes you. It makes you believe that nobody would ever care, not even a human." Tom's expression softened, and he shifted closer to her, his hand resting gently on the ground between them. "I'm not here to pity you, Lyra. I'm here because I want to help you. I see you as someone who deserves a chance, someone who has more to offer than the world has given her credit for. Lyra was silent for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know how to respond, how to acknowledge the sincerity in his words without feeling vulnerable. Instead, she simply nodded, looking away to hide the sudden rush of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. The fire crackled as they sat in silence, the distance between them both physical and emotional. But, as the night grew deeper, Lyra found herself inching closer to Tom, drawn to the warmth he offered, not just from the fire, but from his presence, his quiet strength. She had spent so long alone, afraid to trust anyone, but Tom was different. He had shown her kindness, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know where this strange connection would lead, but for the first time, she allowed herself to feel something more than just survival. She allowed herself to feel hope. As the fire died down to glowing embers, Tom stood up and stretched, looking up at the sky. "We should rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Lyra nodded, though her thoughts were still racing. She had so many questions, so many things she wanted to say, but for now, there was only one thing she knew for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. And as they both settled down for the night, side by side under the cold, alien stars, a part of Lyra began to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a place where she truly belonged again. The days continued to pass as Tom and Lyra made their way through the barren landscape. The harsh winds had not let up, but they had grown accustomed to the cold. Their routine had settled into a quiet rhythm, walking, resting, sharing what little they had, and, as the days turned into nights, talking. It wasn't always deep conversation, sometimes it was just simple words to pass the time, but in those moments, something between them was shifting. The silence was no longer uncomfortable, and the distance that had once existed between them was slowly melting away. One evening, as they sat beside a small campfire, the glow of the flames illuminating their faces, Lyra found herself watching Tom again. There was something different in the way she saw him now. He wasn't just a man from Earth helping her out of pity, he had become someone she was beginning to rely on. And as the fire crackled softly, she realized she had started looking forward to their quiet moments together. "Tom," she began, breaking the silence, "why did you really help me? I know you said it was because you couldn't stand seeing someone suffer, but there's more to it, isn't there?" Tom looked at her, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the fire, and he exhaled slowly before responding. "Maybe it's because I see something in you, Lyra. I don't know what it is, but you're not just some outcast. You're more than that. And I guess I just wanted to help someone who deserved a chance." Lyra felt a lump form in her throat, but she quickly pushed it down. She had never thought of herself as someone deserving of anything, let alone someone's help. Her people had cast her aside, and she had accepted that fate without question. But Tom, he saw something else in her. He saw a person. For the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe she was more than just the mistakes of her past. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded, the warmth in her chest making it difficult to speak. The next morning, as they packed up camp and continued their trek across the desolate land, Lyra noticed something had changed. The path ahead felt less daunting, the winds a little less harsh, and Tom's presence beside her was a constant reassurance. They didn't speak much as they walked, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. They were no longer strangers, and the bond between them was undeniable. As the hours passed, they reached a narrow ravine, the rocky cliffs towering above them. The only way forward was to navigate through it, and the wind had picked up again, making the climb more difficult. Tom looked at Lyra and smiled. "You ready for this?" he asked. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, but she squared her shoulders, a determined look on her face. "I've come this far. I'm not stopping now," she said, her voice steady. With that, they began the climb, carefully making their way through the rocky terrain. It was slow, exhausting work, but they kept going, one step at a time. Every so often, Tom would glance over at her, offering a word of encouragement, and Lyra felt a strange sense of gratitude for him. They reached the top just as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the valley below. Tom stopped and turned to her, his face glowing with a mixture of exhaustion and pride. "We made it," he said, his voice soft. Lyra stood beside him, taking in the view. The world stretched out before them, endless, vast, and full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. And as she looked at Tom, standing next to her, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a future for her after all. One that didn't involve isolation, pain, or rejection. But a future built on something new, something she hadn't dared to believe in before: hope. The days that followed their climb were easier, though the cold still bit at their skin and the winds continued to howl through the valleys. Lyra's strength was returning more quickly now, thanks to Tom's unwavering support. They had reached a place where the ground seemed a little more forgiving, and the path forward was clearer. The mountains stretched endlessly before them, but something had changed in Lyra. She no longer looked at the journey as a death sentence, but as a challenge she was ready to face. Each step they took seemed lighter, and with each passing day, the bond between them deepened. One evening, as the two of them sat near their campfire, Tom began to hum a tune quietly to himself, a melody that seemed to flow with ease from his lips. Lyra listened, captivated by the softness of his voice. It was strange, hearing something so tender in a place so harsh. It felt comforting, like a piece of home, even though neither of them had one here. "What is that song?" Lyra asked after a moment, her voice soft. Tom looked over at her, surprised that she had been listening. "Just a little something my mother used to sing. It's a song from Earth." Lyra nodded, a small, wistful smile appearing on her face. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. There was a pause before she added, "I never had a song like that. My people, we had songs, but they were for war, not for comfort." Tom's expression softened as he looked at her. He didn't say anything at first, but there was a gentle sadness in his eyes. "Sometimes, people forget that it's okay to have peace, to have moments of quiet," he said. "I think everyone deserves that, even you." Lyra felt a sudden wave of emotion rise in her chest, something she hadn't expected. For so long, she had lived with the belief that she was alone, that she had to be strong at all costs. She had never allowed herself to think about peace, or even comfort, because she felt unworthy of it. But now, sitting beside Tom, hearing the song that reminded her of things she had long forgotten, she couldn't help but feel something new stirring within her, a longing for something more than just survival. "Thank you, Tom," Lyra said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "For everything. I don't know how to repay you." Tom smiled, but there was no arrogance in it, only kindness. "You don't need to repay me, Lyra. I'm just here because I want to be. I believe in you." His words hit her harder than she expected, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't beyond saving. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. The stars above seemed clearer that night, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting its soft glow over the world below. It was peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, Lyra felt like she belonged, not to a people who had rejected her, but to something more, something that Tom had shown her. As the night wore on and the fire began to burn low, they settled into their makeshift bedrolls, each lost in their thoughts. Lyra's mind was racing, but there was a calmness there too, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but for now, she allowed herself to rest, to believe that this new chapter in her life wasn't just about surviving, it was about living. And maybe, just maybe, it was also about learning to trust again. The night was quiet, the only sounds being the wind and the soft hum of the stars overhead. Lyra drifted off to sleep, a small, contented smile playing on her lips, knowing that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. The next morning, the sun broke through the cold, pale sky, casting a soft, golden light over the land. Tom and Lyra had packed up their camp and set out once again, the path before them still uncertain, but somehow, the world felt different. Lyra's body had regained some of its strength, and though the journey ahead would be long, she felt the weight of her past lifting, if only slightly. As they walked, Tom noticed the change in her. There was a quiet determination in her steps now, an inner strength that hadn't been there before. He smiled to himself, knowing that in some small way, he had helped her find it. "You're looking stronger today," Tom said, glancing over at her. Lyra turned her head to meet his gaze, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I feel better," she replied, her voice steady.
I don't know what it is about you, Tom, but I feel like I can keep going. Tom nodded, his expression softening. You're stronger than you think, Lyra. You always were.
They continued their journey, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty landscape.
The days passed, and with each one, their bond grew. They shared more
stories, exchanged laughs, and began to understand each other in ways neither had anticipated. Despite their differences, one from a distant planet, the other from Earth, their shared experiences had created an unexpected connection. Tom found himself thinking about Lyra more than he ever expected. There was something about her resilience, her quiet strength, that fascinated him. He had always been drawn to those who had faced adversity, but there was more to her than that. She was intelligent, proud, and yet, despite all that, there was a vulnerability to her, something that only came through when she let her guard down. And with each passing day, she was letting that guard down, piece by piece. Lyra, too, found herself thinking about Tom. At first, she had only seen him as the human who had saved her, the stranger from another world who had shown her kindness. But as the days wore on, she realized he was more than that. He wasn't just a savior, a protector, he was someone who understood, someone who made her feel like she wasn't alone in a universe that had abandoned her. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lyra found herself staring at the stars above. She had always been taught to view the stars as distant and cold, symbols of everything she could never reach. But now, they seemed closer, almost within reach. Tom joined her, sitting silently at her side. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. Lyra nodded, though the thoughts swirling in her mind made it hard to speak. "I've just been thinking about everything. How far I've come. How much has changed since I met you?" Tom glanced at her, his heart beating a little faster at the sincerity in her words.
"You've come a long way, Lyra. You're stronger than I think you realize."
The two of them sat in silence for a while, the warmth of the fire between them, the cold night air around them. It was a peaceful moment, a rare one in a world that had been anything but peaceful for either of them. Lyra finally broke the silence, her voice soft but steady. "You've given me something I never thought I would have again, Tom. Hope." Tom looked at her, his heart swelling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "I didn't do it alone," he said quietly. "You're the one who fought to get here." Lyra smiled, and for the first time in a long while, it was a smile full of warmth and gratitude. "Maybe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you helped me find the strength to keep going." Tom didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said everything that words couldn't. They were no longer just two travelers on a desolate planet. They were companions, bound by something deeper than survival. And for the first time since they had met, Lyra felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She wasn't sure what the future held, or where their journey would take them, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. The days blurred together as Tom and Lyra continued their journey, the desolate landscape stretching endlessly before them. The mountains had given way to more rocky terrain, the wind still biting at their faces, but they had become accustomed to it. Lyra's strength had returned in full, her movements no longer hesitant, but confident. She had learned to rely on her body again, to trust in her ability to survive, and with each passing day, she found herself becoming more at ease with Tom by her side. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a silent bond that had formed over the course of their travels. They didn't need to speak much anymore. A glance, a shared smile, and they understood each other. It was a rare comfort for Lyra, who had once believed that isolation was her only fate. As the sun dipped low in the sky one evening, they found a small cave to shelter in for the night. Tom gathered what little firewood he could find, and they sat together by the fire, the crackling warmth a welcome relief from the chill. Lyra stared into the flames, her mind wandering. She had never imagined that her life would take such a turn. Not long ago, she had been abandoned on a cold, dying world, convinced that there was no future for her. But now, sitting next to Tom, she felt like maybe there was more to life than just surviving. Maybe she could have a future after all. "Tom," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "Do you ever wonder what's next? After all this?" Tom didn't immediately respond, but when he did, his voice was soft
and thoughtful.
Yeah, he said, staring into the fire.
I think about it a lot.
But right now, all I can focus on is the here and now. We've come this far together, and that's all that matters.
Whatever happens next, we'll face it together.
Lyra nodded, the warmth of his words wrapping around her like a blanket. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. It wasn't something she was used to, but with Tom, it felt natural.
She didn't feel like the outcast she once was.
With him, she was just a person, someone worth caring for. The thought made her heart swell in ways she hadn't expected. As the fire flickered low, Lyra turned to Tom.
I never thought I'd find someone like you, she said quietly. Someone who actually cares.
Tom looked at her, his blue eyes meeting hers with sincerity.
I've always believed that everyone deserves to be seen, to be cared for. Especially someone like you, Lyra.
His words struck something deep inside her, something she had buried for so long. She hadn't known what it was like to be truly seen, not until now.
Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion.
Tom smiled, a small, gentle smile that made Lyra's heart beat faster. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the distant howling of the wind.
For the first time, Lyra didn't feel afraid of the future.
She didn't know what it held, but she knew one thing for sure, she wasn't alone anymore. The stars above seemed clearer than ever that night, as if they were guiding her toward something new, something full of promise. She didn't know what that future looked like yet, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to find out.
And as she looked over at Tom, she realized that whatever came next,
they would face it together. The journey had grown easier, though still grueling. The terrain had started to change once again, becoming more uneven with jagged rocks and deeper valleys. The wind still howled, but it didn't feel as biting anymore. They had learned to adapt, to rely on each other, and to survive together. The days were filled with purposeful silence as they moved forward, each step a reminder of how far they had come.
Lyra had become
more than just someone Tom was helping. She was someone he had come to care for deeply.
There was no doubt in his mind anymore.
He had come to depend on her in ways he hadn't expected. Her strength, her intelligence, the way she faced every challenge head-on, it all made him admire her more with each passing day. And Lyra, though she was still hesitant to acknowledge it, had begun to feel something for Tom too. It was the quiet moments they shared, the way he never pushed her, never made her feel like she was a burden. She had spent so many years being told she was worthless, cast aside by her own people, but with Tom, she felt valued. They made it to the edge of a vast cliff one evening, the sun setting behind them and casting a golden glow over the land. The view was breathtaking, miles of endless horizon stretching before them. It was the perfect moment to stop and reflect, and for the first time in a long time, Lyra allowed herself to truly appreciate the beauty around her. We've come a long way, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom, standing beside her, nodded. Yeah, we have, he said, his voice full of quiet pride. They stood there in silence for a few moments, the weight of their journey settling over them like a warm blanket. Then, without turning to look at her, Tom spoke again. You know, I never thought I'd find someone like you. Lyra turned her gaze toward him, her heart skipping a beat. Someone like me, she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty.
Tom finally met her eyes, his gaze steady and sincere.
Someone who's fought through so much and still kept going. Someone who reminds me that there's always a reason to push forward, no matter how hard it gets. Lyra felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. His words meant more to her than she could say. I never thought I'd find someone who cared, not like this, she replied, her voice thick with emotion. Tom stepped closer, his hand reaching out toward hers. For a moment, neither of them moved. But then Lyra took a breath and placed her hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything.
They didn't need to say more. In
that moment, the world felt still, as if time had paused just for them. The wind had died down, the stars were beginning to emerge above them, and the future, whatever it held, suddenly seemed less daunting. They had each other.
And that was enough for now.
As they made their way back to their camp, side by side, the quiet comfort of their companionship filled the space between them. Lyra had never known peace like this, but now, she couldn't imagine her life without it.
She had a companion. A friend. Maybe, just maybe, someone who could become something more.
And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future, one that didn't involve survival alone, but one where she could share her life, her journey, with someone who truly cared.